Boy X, page 12. Beyond the front door, Ash could see a large clearing surrounded by a 50-foot-tall chain-link fence. On the other side, there was nothing but trees. But they weren't oak and sycamore or horse chestnut. They weren't the kind of trees that lined the gray, rain-soaked street he lived on. Excuse me. These trees were thick and green and leafy. They grew close together and were topped with fronds and fans. Some had strange, grotesque roots. Some had trunks spiked like medieval weapons, while others were fat, with contorted faces hidden in knotted bark. They sprouted unfamiliar fruits, and many were hanging with vines. Ash couldn't believe what he was seeing. It looked like a jungle, and even though the tinted glass of the dome he could tell, it was bright out there, because light glittered among the leaves like jewels, and in the center of the clearing a large black helicopter gleamed in the sun. Almost without thinking, he crossed the lobby and padded toward the exit. As he came closer, the sensors detected him, and the doors swished open, letting in a blast of hot, humid air. It took his breath away, rushing down into his lungs and making him gasp, bombarding him with another sensory overload. The world was alive out there. Ash put his hands to his ears and closed his eyes as the powerful jumble of sights, sounds, and smells flooded his senses. It felt like it was a TV on full volume, flicking from channel to channel, never pausing on anything for more than a split second. Everything was amplified, as if someone had turned all the dials up to 11 inside his head. There was a continuous chirping of insects, the bright and cheerful call of birds, the rustle of the breeze in the treetops. Ash could hear the hum of electricity through the chain-link fence, a high-pitched, irritating whine that veiled everything like a thin cotton sheet. And after all that white inside of the building, colors exploded in his vision. A million different shades of green, splashes of red, snatches of yellow, and purple and pink. There was the scent of dark earth, too, and the strong perfume of flowers and the cloying stink of helicopter fuel. In the blind confusion, he dropped to his knees and curled into a tight ball, trying to clear his mind. He had to make it go away. He opened his mouth to scream, but a single image came into his head. Dad. Dad was telling him not to be afraid, that he was strong. I am strong, Ash whispered to himself. I can do this. He focused on those words, and instead of trying to push the smells away, he accepted them. Instead of trying to shut out the sounds, he took his hands away from his ears and let himself hear them. And when he eased open his eyes, he allowed the colors to flood in. He reached again for the tag around his neck and squeezed it between finger and thumb. I am strong, he said louder, daring to look around. I am strong. The sounds and smells and sights began to control it better and choose the things he wanted to hear, although there was still the high-pitched whining that made his stomach queasy. Ash scanned the forest. Everything was so clear. He could see each individual leaf on the trees beyond the fence. He could spot the movement of the birds in the branches. It was as if he'd spent the past 12 years looking at the world through a greasy window that had just been cleaned. And now that he accepted the sounds, he could pick out the song of each individual bird. It was confusing, frightening, amazing. He got up and moved out into the clearing as if it were a new world. The heat wrapped around him like a comfortable blanket. The doors swished closed behind him as he walked into the wide-bladed grass, warm and spongy under his bare feet. He approached the helicopter that sat like a sleek animal, reaching out to touch it, wondering if he had traveled here on it. The paintwork was blistering hot, and he snatched his fingers away, thinking it must have been sitting there for a while beneath the intense sun. How long had he been asleep? How long had he been in this place? Once again, Ash looked at the solid wall of jungle beyond the fence, no more than 300 feet in front of him. He remembered when he had visited his mom's family and Dad had taken him into the forest a few times. He'd wanted to show Ash different ways to make a fire and how to build a shelter, and they had even spent a whole night in there, surrounded by the intense darkness and terrifying noises. Ash hadn't gotten much sleep, but Dad had been pleased with him. He'd make a good jungle survivor one day. Ash hadn't been so sure. Sleeping in a comfortable bed was much better than an unstable hammock under a leaky poncho. Roasting chunks of Mom's tandoori chicken over the fire had been good, though, and at least the mosquitoes had left him alone, even though they'd feasted on Dad. Ash wondered if maybe that's where they were now, India. Maybe this was all something to do with Mom. He saw that the building he had come from was a large concrete dome-like structure with the glazed lobby area protruding like the entrance to an igloo. The glass was mirrored on the outside and the sun blazed from every surface of it. Trees curved around the whole area, following the line of the fence as if the building was inside a massive clearing. And Ash didn't like the look of that fence. The way it hummed with electricity made him shiver when he realized it must be there to keep something in, or to keep something out. Over to his right, he spotted a gap in the fence. It was difficult to tell from this angle, but there appeared to be a fenced-off path leading into the jungle which... a noise. It was faint but unmistakable. Footsteps. Ash froze, unsure what to do, and a moment later a pair of startled birds rose from the trees. With black and white markings like magpies, they squawked and clattered their wings as they flew high and separated, disappearing over the forest. Ash wondered how he could have heard the noise before the birds. The footsteps came closer, and he saw movement through the links in the fence. His instinct was to get away from whoever was coming, but this was the first sign of life he had seen since waking. Maybe they could help him. Maybe it was Mom. A figure came along the path and emerged through the gap in the clearing. She moved into the open, swinging a stick, and walked several feet before catching sight of Ash and halting in her tracks. The girl was young, maybe about his own age, and fairly tall with olive skin and long dark hair parted down the middle. It occurred to Ash that she might be dangerous and want to hurt him or bring other people who would hurt him. Adrenaline was firing through his blood, making his whole body tingle, preparing it for whatever was coming next. His eyes flicked from the girl to the ground as he searched for a rock, a stick, any kind of weapon. The girl pulled her left hand from the pocket of her combat pants and raised it in greeting. "Hola," she called out. "Cómo está?" Ash was still half-turned, ready to run, and his fists were balled, ready to fight. "Hola," she said again with a wave. "Hello." It looked and sounded like a friendly greeting. "Te has perdido?" I don't speak Spanish, sorry. She asked, "Are you lost?" She swung the stick up and rested it on her shoulder before heading toward Ash, bringing with her the sweet smell of ginger and cinnamon, a hint of coconut too. "Speak English?" He nodded. "You must be from the helicopter." She had a thick accent, as if English wasn't her first language. "You looked, how you say it, out of it." As she came closer, Ash stepped back, holding up his fists. The girl stopped. She glanced at the stick in her hand, then frowned and threw it to one side. "I won't hurt you." Ash kept his guard up. "My name is Isabel." Confused and still wary of her, Ash remained silent and suspicious. He looked the girl up and down, seeing her jungle boots, t-shirt, and combat pants. He wondered what she must think of him. A skinny boy, shorter than average, wearing nothing but a pair of pajamas. When Ash didn't answer, the girl shrugged. "I liked your hair. It looks cool, the white." She put a finger to her head and drew it from front to back. "It looks good." Ash narrowed his eyes. "Where are we?" "Isla Negra." She flicked her hand to sweep away a strand of hair that had fallen across her eyes. "Black Island, and that is the biosphere." She gestured toward the building. Ash didn't like the sound of Black Island or the biosphere, but all he could do was add it to the list of things he didn't like about this place. "You saw us arrive? My mom too?" "Si, 2 days ago. It was like a slap in the face. 2 days? How was that possible? Surely Ash couldn't have been asleep for 2 days. Do you know where my mom is? Isabel touched the collar of her faded black t-shirt. She paused. In the laboratory, I guess, she nodded, pleased to have gotten the word right. With Papa. You've seen her? Ash felt a glimmer of relief. She's all right? Your mama is Marina, like you, brown skin, with dark hair like mine, about this high? She held her hand about 12 inches above her head. Yeah. Then I did see her. She came off the helicopter with you and the others. I asked Papa who you were, but he said it was a secret. There are many secrets here, so I didn't ask again. Come, I take you to Papa. With that, Isabel walked past, heading toward the biosphere. Ash hesitated, afraid to trust her. Come, Isabel insisted, and smiled at her. We'll find your mama. There wasn't much choice, so Ash followed, asking, What is this place? Where is everyone? The doors swished open, and they walked into the cool interior of the building. I already told you, Isla Negra, Isabel said. It is an island near Costa Rica. What? Ash couldn't hide his shock. Costa Rica? Isn't that like South America or something? Central America. And we are not many here. Just a few. Until you came to... Her last words were interrupted by the loudest and most awful wailing, a high-pitched electronic screeching that drilled into their heads. Isabel stopped with her mouth open and put her hands to her ears, but Ash hunched, stunned by the outburst. It felt like an enormous spike was being hammered through his skull, and he screamed in pain. He squeezed the dog tag tight in his fist and imagined he was back at home in his bedroom with headphones on, listening to music. Mom and Dad were downstairs, and everything was as it should be. Everything was normal. After a few seconds, the pain began to fade, and the sound withdrew as if being dragged away through a tunnel. The harder he concentrated, the easier it became. Are you okay? Isabel was shouting in his ear. Are you? Yes. Ash let go of the tag and held up his hand. I'm fine. He opened his eyes and looked at her. What's that noise? The alarm, Isabel said. Something must have happened. Then, from somewhere inside the building, came the sound that was far more frightening. Ash had never heard it before in real life, but he had seen enough films and played enough video games to know what it was. Gunfire.